Well, greetings and salutations, old friends and new, and welcome to a brand new journey. This is my new show. It's called Truthseekers, where we go down some crazy rabbit holes and look into some of the craziest stories and try to find out if they're actually true. Tonight, I thought we'd start with one of my new favorite rabbit holes to go down, and that is the legend of the Hairy Man of Alaska. Now, you may be familiar with Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and Yeti, but even people very familiar with Bigfoot stories that I talk to, many have not heard of the Hairy Man of Alaska. Now, there's some very distinct differences between normal Sasquatch sightings and the Hairy Man of Alaska. Most importantly, the Hairy Man of Alaska appears to be a very territorial, aggressive, some say murderous beast. This is an incredible story. And I thought we could go through some of the reasons that I believe there's some meat on the bones. This is a great story, but not just because it's a great story. To me, it's a great story because it just may be true. There is ample supportive evidence to support this story being factually correct, believe it or not. For those that are not aware, most of the Port Chatham sightings of this hairy man or Sasquatch creature took place beginning in the 1900s when it was first settled. You're talking about hundreds of square miles of barren wilderness that was rich in salmon, timber, minerals, precious metals. It's just an untapped hundreds of square miles of natural resources. So people started settling it in the early 1900s. And one curious thing about this case that I've always found very curious is that there were no native peoples anywhere near what became Port Chatham, Alaska. Later, I began to believe that the natives left that wilderness alone for a reason that the settlers would soon learn about. Tonight, I also wanted to bring in a special guest tonight. So I called my friend Jason Quitt, who's from Canada, where Bigfoot sightings are pretty prevalent. And I know that he's kind of a buff and likes to hear Bigfoot stories. So I called him about this and said, have you ever heard of this? Stop what you're doing. You've got to check this story out. We're going to bring him in here with us. And I want to welcome our first guest here, Jason Quitt. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing pretty good up in Canada, but I'm not sleeping well after hearing these stories you told me.
This is a great story. It begins, I have a whole bunch of notes here. In 1901, hairy upright walking creatures began to be reported by the local settlers. And one person reported that it growled and ran at them. This was a prospector. He said they were most hideous creatures. I could not call them anything but devils. That's a quote from him. And he claimed that if he did not see them and escape quickly, they would have made short work of him. So we've got all the way back to 1901 is one of the first reports of a very aggressive, crazy creature in the woods of Alaska.
And this is a very different story because most of the Bigfoot stories that I've heard have been basically benign. The most that I've heard is that they're throwing rocks or hitting trees with woods. But this story is at a completely different level. It doesn't even sound like a normal Bigfoot sighting.
That's what I found fascinating about it, is that I've heard, especially running my radio show, it's on the paranormal topics. And so people email me, people call me, and every Bigfoot story kind of goes the same way. I was in the woods or near the woods. I, heard crackling and walking or something. And then I saw this upright, hairy walking creature. And then when he noticed that I saw him, he ran away. They're not confrontational like this. Every one of these reports is a confrontational report, and some of them get into murder and mutilation and terrorizing of the entire town and settlement.
Now, before we get started, Stephen, I'd like to just personally ask you if you had any sightings or any thing in your entire life with Bigfoot?
In my entire life, I was on the Appalachian Trail, and suddenly me and the few people that I was with, we got boulders. And I don't mean rocks, I mean boulders hurled at us. Now, granted, it was down a hill, but they were in the air. And we kind of walked back in the woods to try to see what it was. We never found out. We packed our shit and got out of there. That was my only thing that may have been something like a Bigfoot. I don't know, but I don't know a man that could throw boulders that big up in the air.
That's crazy, actually.
And you've had a few too, right?
I've had a few, and this made me really think back to when I was a child. And I know that I was 15 years old when this happened to me because I was listening to Korn Adidas album. So I had to go back and look up.
Adidas, oh my God, that's the 90s, bro.
That's the 90s.
Yeah.
So I looked that up, and it was 1995, 96 when I would be listening to that. So I'd be 15 years old. I was in the middle of nowhere in Ontario in the cottage country called Muskoka. And I was there with my father and my brother. And I'm sleeping in the middle of the night, and I get woken up by this most horrific scream coming from the woods.
Oh, that's scary. That's scary enough.
It was really scary. And the only way I could describe it was like a shrilling, like a woman getting murdered or something. Like it was at that level of shrill.
Oh, that's not good.
Not good. So it freaked me out. I jumped out of bed and I kind of walked slowly to the window, and then I heard it again. And it just scared me so much. I went back to sleep, but my brother didn't hear it. He was sleeping, and my father didn't hear it. He was sleeping.
That's crazy.
And I always remember that because it sounded like it just kind of echoed, because we were by the lake. It sounded like it echoed through the entire area.
Yeah, and a lot of people say they communicate long distances by hooping and screaming.
Yeah, so it was a very loud, the thing is I live in the country here, just north of Toronto in the wilderness, some would say.
Yes, Jason lives in Bumble, Canada.
That's right.
Nowhere, Canada. His town's actually called Nowhere, Canada.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome. No, I envy Jason because he lives in a vast wilderness area, and I'm sure it's very peaceful, a nice place to live. But the winters at my cabin, which is not that much more south than you, are terrible. So I don't want to go to Canada.
Yeah. We have what is it called? What is it? Lake snow effect, I think is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, we have to shovel almost every day in the winter and snow.
Yeah, you have 6 months of winter like I do at the cabin. But this hairy man thing is so different from the normal Bigfoot sort of reports. And the other thing that's so different is there is such a history here of actual documentation. I've got some notes here. In 1905, the cannery supervisor's logbook. For those that don't know, Port Chatham became a salmon cannery because there were salmon jumping all over the place. And salmon was in demand, so somebody, they settled the place, they built a cannery, they had built docks. Fishermen would go out and get the salmon, sell them to the cannery would can them and ship them all over the world. But in 1905, the cannery supervisor's logbook said, something menacing is in the forest causing problems. And the entire cannery shut down for the rest of the season after reports of missing people and a hairy, upright creature terrorizing the local townspeople. They shut the entire cannery down. Now, remember, this was shipping cans of salmon all over the world. So I'm sure you don't just shut the cannery down when it's big and profitable. They shut it down for the rest of the season. The workers refused to stay. And many returned the next season, but for that season, total washout. They reported a large walking creature reported in and around the settlement. And there could be no misidentification, according to experts, because these people were very familiar with bears. That's a common thing that people say, oh, they're just seeing bears scratching their backs on a tree standing up or something like that. But no.
What these people actually said is that they felt like they were being stalked and hunted by something in the woods. And very interesting is that I was doing a little research on this, and I found something where it said that this wasn't actually the first time they had to shut this down.
Yeah, and there was also reports, and I have a firsthand witness. I have a grandson of one of the former residents who said that the workers at the cannery actually got together and just refused to go to the cannery, refused to work unless they hired armed security guards to protect them walking back and forth from their homes. That's how crazy things got, and this hysteria built up in this town about this crazy thing that people were seeing.
Yes, and in that same time period, in the 1920s, there was a man by the name of Albert Petka.
Yes.
And he was in the woods right there by the cannery. And he was
I have him in my notes, yeah.
Yeah, and he was walking with his dogs. And this is a really crazy story because he's an eyewitness.
And it's a deathbed confession, which I always give. Why would somebody make up a crazy story while they're laying there dying?
Yes.
So this guy was, you could go ahead, he was attacked by this creature.
And the dogs managed to scare this creature away, but the creature hit him so hard in the chest. And basically, he got to the hospital with his wounds, but he died of them. That's how severe this hit to the chest was from this creature.
Great. And then, and shortly before his death, he told this story to the medical personnel and his family. So I give a tremendous amount of weight to a piece of evidence like that, because I just think, why would the guy just make up something crazy like that while he's laying there dying? He kind of wanted his family to know what happened to him, I guess. Maybe he knew he was dying. I don't know. But it's the deathbed confession has got a lot of weight evidentiary-wise to me.
And remember, it's like we're dealing with Alaska. Okay, we're dealing with, I believe it's southeastern Alaska.
Sure.
And this is no man's land. There is nothing out there but wilderness.
No, hundreds of square miles of nothing.
And these creatures
that the natives will not live in that area too.
That's right.
They will not live there.
And the natives know about this, and they say that there's the evil spirits that live there, so they will not go into that area.
They won't go anywhere near that place. That's why there was this untapped wilderness, and I'm sure that the original settlers were like, "This is great. All these resources are here, and nobody's here, so we won't have to bargain with the locals to get some land or anything. We can just move right in." And that's what they did. And later, I guess they might have found out why there was no natives in this area whatsoever.
Yes. And actually, the story that you said with the boulders being thrown at you that are just too heavy for a man to pick up and throw, there's kind of a similar case to that in this region. And it has to do, there was this man called Andrew Kamluck. And he went out logging in the 1930s. And he was found dead from some type of blow to the head with a piece of logging equipment. All right. So this logging equipment was used as a weapon to basically hit this guy over the head with. And this logging equipment, it would take 3-4 men to pick this thing up and lift it and smack him in the head with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm taking some comments from the live chat and putting them on the screen.
Oh, great.
If you guys have actual questions for me or Jason, we're going to try to dig a little deeper into this. But as we do, if you have actual questions, put them in all caps, and I'll try to get them up on the screen. I appreciate all of you guys being here.
Nice. I'm going to watch the screen. I wasn't watching the screen before. So
now I'm trying to pay attention to my notes here. And then, so we have the Albert Petka story that we just talked about. And then you're right. And later, that was 1932. But in the 20s and 30s leading up to this 1932 incident that you're talking about, there was missing hunters, there was missing children, there was mangled and murdered, dismembered corpses with their heads, arms, and legs ripped off that washed up on the lagoon or were found in the nearby forests after someone went missing. That is absolutely terrifying. And we have multiple reports of this through the 20s and 30s, multiple murders. And that the bodies, if they found them, either they found nothing when somebody went missing, or within a few days or a week, they found a completely mangled, murdered corpse that was either dismembered or had their arms and legs ripped off. And I just wanted to say, I was curious about this because I thought, well, a grizzly bear could do that. So I reached out to a wildlife biologist, and they told me, no, bears will not do that. Bears, if they attack a human at all, they will eat the fleshy parts of the body, the easy parts, like the muscles on the back and stomach and things like that. But they will not rip arms and legs or heads off of a corpse. So that's part of the mystery. It couldn't have been a bear that did that, or any other animal really in that area, I don't think, right?
That's right. And when you go back to this, this is terrifying. This is not funny at all. But it's not one or two cases. Okay, it's about 30 plus people reported murder.
You know what? That's funny. I was just going to say that I found specific instances of at least 25. You know, and I was just shocked with each new one that I found, because you've got sort of on the record firsthand witnesses saying this is what happened. This person went missing, then we found their corpse, and their corpse was missing the head, or the head was pulled off of the body and the arms were ripped off. It's terrifying. And imagine that this keeps happening and the stories are growing in the town of this hairy man in the forest. It's crazy.
Yes. And it's not just one. Let me see if I can go back to these notes, because there was a story there, and maybe you have a little more notes than I do on this, but an entire hunting crew went into the forest.
Yeah, I did read a report of that.
And basically, this hunting crew, they're out hunting goats and bears, and the entire, I don't remember the number, it was at least a dozen people. They just disappeared. And they all had weapons. They were all trained. They knew what they were doing.
They were used to the terrain and the environment and the tough conditions of Alaska. They probably were experts at starting fires and survival skills too, which is scary to me that a dozen of them will just vanish off the face of the earth.
And then they sent
in
teams,
the middle of all this other stuff that is going on, right?
Yes, and they even sent rescue missions out into the forest to try to locate them, and they were never found. And then days later, body parts started to show up in the lagoon coming down the mountain.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, they would just find arms, legs, heads, torsos, And I have a report that's very, this one I haven't found elsewhere because I found it through a friend of a friend that lives in Alaska. I spoke with Peter Schuster, who was the grandson of Joshua Schuster, a one-time cannery worker in Port Chatham during this time. And this is a quote from him. He says, "My grandfather told me stories that the whole town lived in fear of the monster in the forest. People went hunting, never came back. Sometimes people went missing and their mangled bodies were found in the forest days later, or they would wash up on the shore. People started packing up and leaving. My granddad never saw the monster, but he said he knew many people who did claim to see it. In the summer of 1947, he saw the murdered body of a good friend and coworker. He found it in the forest, ripped in half at the waist. That was enough for him. He packed up his wife and children and left for the mainland the very next day. And to his death, he would never return to Alaska, much less Port Chatham."
See, whatever people say, all right, people could be skeptical and say whatever they want about paranormal events or what's out there. But when you have an entire town of people that are being terrorized for 50 plus years.
Yeah, absolutely, right?
And they have the bodies showing up, the people just vanished. Something happened. And I don't know if this came up in your research, but something happened around the late 40s and 50s there, where it started to get actually more violent. More people would just disappear. And these disappearances were very strange. It's just, they didn't even have to go into the woods. It's like someone in town would just completely vanish out of nowhere and just show up ripped apart. So these are very, very real cases.
Oh yeah, Reemsy says I would run if I saw a monster. Yeah, I after hearing this, I used to really be big on like, I want to go explore Alaska, and then I heard this, and all these stories, and I thought maybe not. It's a scary thing, and we have by 1949, by most accounts, the entire town is abandoned. There was chromite mines, silver mines, other precious metal mines, multiple mines, and equipment all abandoned. Schools, homes, churches, all abandoned. Canneries, the boats, the fishery, the docks, the wharfs, and buildings supporting the fishery, all abandoned. Stores, businesses, everything, all abandoned. So there had to be something crazy to make an entire town just abandon it. You don't abandon it, all of that, all those resources, and all the infrastructure that you built up over decades.
The bottom line is that they just couldn't take it anymore. They were continually terrorized by whatever this thing is, and gone. And like you said, there's resources there. It's like there's money to be made. There's
literally a gold mine there. There's a silver mine there. There's a chromite mine there. And the salmon in that area, it's like literally like fish in a barrel. They would just take hundreds of pounds of salmon from the nets in constantly. That's crazy to just abandon all that.
Do you think that maybe it was the cannery that was the reason for these vicious attacks? That was their food source?
It could have been. If the salmon were their food source and they start depleting the food source, this thing might get angry very quickly. And not only that, but it seems to me that if this thing has if it's a meat eater and suddenly it's smelling all these fish being processed, they have to like cook them before they can them. So I'm sure that smell was getting in the air. Mm-hmm. I don't know what would cause this. But the other interesting thing that I found about this case is that normal Bigfoots are described in a certain way: 8 foot tall, hairy, ape-like. And this is also described as ape-like, but some reports were that these things were 12 to 15 foot tall and had claws and fangs, which is not normal.
We could be dealing with a completely different species of, we call them Bigfoot, but could be something completely different that lives in the woods that we have no idea about, that could be very violent.
I'm going to share screen. This is an artist depiction that I liked. I used it on my poster.
Let's see that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that looks a little more intimidating than the average Sasquatch, which generally looks, most depictions of Sasquatch, they almost look friendly. They almost look like the friendly, hairy guy in the forest, right? This thing does not look friendly to me, not one bit. So
yes, and there's an Eskimo that lives in there, and they have this history with this beast in this area. And the way that he describes it, he's an elder. He says it's 9 to 10 foot tall.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm putting this share screen. Yeah. This is another thing that I found that I thought was crazy, and this is a size comparison. Here we have a mountain gorilla, a human male. We have a bear, a Bigfoot, and then this is what is described as the hairy man of Alaska, which is huge in comparison to these other things.
And this fits with people actually went there, I believe it was in the 80s, after it was abandoned, and they came up to the ghost town, because literally there's a ghost town there now.
Yeah, it's the creepiest abandoned town in Alaska from all accounts, from people that have visited there. And you can only access it mostly by boat through Anchorage, which is a couple 100 miles though. So you need to take a couple 100-mile boat ride from Anchorage to get there.
And no one will tell you about it. It's like a hidden secret. They don't want people to go there. They don't want anybody to know about this place.
I wonder why that is.
Yeah. But in the 80s, I believe, explorers went to go check it out again. And when they got there, they actually found tracks in the soil. And it was about, I think they said it was about 18 inches. These tracks.
I've seen some of that stuff. 18-inch tracks. That's a big animal. The only thing that I always think though about track evidence is that I saw double step of a bear and how that could be turned into like a really big, almost Bigfoot like print. So I'm a little
Yes.
skeptical about all the track evidence, but then I see stuff like Jeff Meldrum and he's talking about there's a mid-tarsal break, and you can't fake that with a bear two-step or with a
No.
fake pair of, there was a guy that was running around with a fake pair of, Bigfoot feet made out of wood, but you can't fake the prints that people find in some of these,
No.
you
And
know.
I've personally witnessed tracks up in Washington State. I personally witnessed tracks. They were found by children, and they brought us over to the tracks, and they were big. They were probably the same, around 18 inches. It looked like a human foot, barefoot with the ridges, and you could see the toes clearly in the ground, and it was about an inch into the ground. So the pressure of the animal pushed the ground in an inch. Now, I'm about 200 pounds. I'm jumping up and down on that ground. I'm not even making a mark, So this thing had to have been double or triple my weight. But the most interesting thing was there was 4 tracks. In the last track, it wasn't a foot. It was like 3 toes dug into just 3 toes, like it jumped.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And maybe only 3 toes made contact or something like that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I have another one of those size comparisons. That's
And Jonicide, by the way, who's in the live chat, was there with me. So he can confirm that both Jonicide and me saw those tracks together.
Oh, jonicide. Yeah, so we have another witness. And here's another size comparison. Again, we have a human male, a gorilla, Sasquatch, and then there's the hairy man. And I also think that some of this 15-foot tall, creature kind of coincides with a lot of the native legends about giants in the forest.
Yes.
It could be one and the same legend, actually.
Yes. And, just look at the human being in this picture compared to him.
Yeah.
This thing could pick you up like nothing.
Scary.
And if it wanted to just rip you in half, look at the difference between you and it. It would be no problem just to go.
This is why I love this story, because no matter what you say, some people go, oh, there's nothing to this Bigfoot thing. But this one, in particular, this one case is more interesting to me than most Bigfoot cases or stories because of the evidentiary support that you can find. I got another one here. Former Portlock resident, and Portlock was right next to Port Chatham. So for today's purpose, we'll just say Port Chatham or.
This is happening there. Chrome, Home. It's like the whole area around this place. Yes.
It's happening in the whole area. So a former resident of Portlock, Melania Helen Keel, was interviewed in the Homer Tribune in 2009. I got a copy of that article, so I'll quote from it. In the article, she said, her godfather, Andrew Kanolik, was murdered and his body mutilated. Her family tried to stay, but a year later they left when more townspeople went missing or were found murdered and mutilated. She said the entire town was terrified and everyone started leaving and abandoning everything. That's how terrified people were. Another crazy firsthand, this is an account from somebody that was there, actually. So that's pretty good evidence that this is not just a story.
Yes. And, many people should be looking at this story as the story for contact of what we would call a wild man in the forest. This should be the #1 story people talk about. There's a lot of Bigfoot shows out there. There's a lot of contact stories happening. Like I just, for sure, me and John were there in Washington together. If that's how funny this is.
Wow, that's cool. I would definitely like to go to the Pacific Northwest and look around. Definitely.
And there was plenty of evidence that was definitely not hoaxes. I had an experience. I've told this before, but I was staying in a cabin up there, and we sleep with the window open, right? Because we get like the fresh air to come in at night.
Because you're from Canada and you're used to being cold.
Yeah. Right. But this window was a wooden style cabin window, and it was almost like it was stuck. Like I couldn't really lift it up, but I got it up there for the night. And in the middle of the night, this window just kind of slammed right down and woke me up. And I just thought it was Monica closing the window. So I just went right back to sleep. The next morning, there was a group of people around the campfire, and one of them was telling a story that they said they saw a Bigfoot last night. And they said, "Oh, where did you see him?" And he goes, like, right there by that window.
Whoa, that's scary.
And he pointed to my window.
You have your window open all night?
I had the window open and something slammed it shut.
Oh man, you must have had a visitor that night.
I don't know. Maybe I stunk and it just couldn't take.
I would have liked to see what you did if that thing crawled in your window and crawled in your bed with you. That would be awesome. Like, hey, what's up, Jason? You're kind of hot.
Oh,
or what? It could be a female, right?
I'm almost as tall, so
yeah,
possibly.
Yeah, we're gonna go. We're gonna take a short break to give out. Do you want to take some calls?
That would be fun.
Or if we got questions in the audience, we're gonna play this short break piece and then take a short break, and we'll be back. And I have this this set up for live calls. So we're going to turn this phone on now. I don't want to ring it through the whole show interrupting us, but we're going to play a bumper, which is going to have the phone number. So if you want to call in live and talk to me or Jason Quitt, or you have comments, questions, you want to tell your own Bigfoot story, you can be able to do that in just a minute. And we're going to be taking questions, comments from the live chat. So bear with me here for a second. Now I have to figure this out.
Thank you, Reemsy. I will not. I promise.
What did Reemsy say? No, Jason must not mate with Sasquatch lady or any sort of monster. Well, see that? You got an out now. If you ever get into like a situation where you might have sex with a Bigfoot, you can say, my friend said that would be a bad idea. So we're going to open the phone lines, and I got to be honest, friends, I'm not sure how great this is going to work. If it works terribly, then we'll apologize to the caller and we'll just take questions from the live chat. But I want to give it a shot. So we're going to play this bumper here, Jason. You just stand by. Okay?
All right. Reemsy knows that when it has big feet, You
like that? Yeah. All right, here we go. We're going to open up the caller lines, friends, and you too can call in to us right here on Truth Seekers. Stand by. And we are back here on Truth Seekers with my very special guest, Jason Quitt. I want to take a moment before I forget to thank Jason for doing this first show with me because, you know, something new, a lot of people will go, well, the numbers won't be worth it or they won't be great. So, but Jason loved this story as much as I did. So thank you, Jason, for doing this.
No problem.
And so far, we've got no calls, but I put the number out. If anybody wants to call in, we'll give it a try. Otherwise, do you mind if we go to the live chat and take some questions?
Sounds good to me.
All right. If you guys have questions, what I need you to do is put them in all caps. We'll put them up on the screen, whether they're for Jason or me. Just put those questions in all caps. We'll know it's a question for us. And let's see. Oh, this one's a great comment. Johnny7 says he really hopes the Sasquatch calls in.
Yes. I don't think pine cones have long distance.
No, definitely not. And, you know, if we have a few spare minutes, I just wanted to mention this other conspiracy theory that I have between Jason and I, and that is that Canadian maple syrup is fake and it's bullshit. There's no such thing. Here's what they do. They get that cheap stuff from China that's made of high fructose corn syrup and fake flavorings, and they jam it into bottles that say like Canadian maple syrup, and then they charge us, you know, $20 for a bottle that they got for 4 cents from China. That's what I think, Jason. I don't think there's any such thing as Canadian maple syrup.
Well, I don't know, Stephen.
Have you heard about the tests? I didn't send them to you. There's been tests where they found no maple in a lot of Canadian so-called maple syrup. That's what I base this conspiracy theory off of. There's no such thing as real Canadian maple syrup. They get it from China, and then they rip us Americans off because we think, ooh, Canadian maple syrup, it must be good. That's why it's $20. No. It's $20 because some guy in Canada knew some idiot would pay that much if he slapped Canadian maple syrup on the bottle.
Well, growing up, we do have a lot of maple trees, and around fall, winter, you could actually go to these places and see the whole process.
Will you take me there? I want to see it made. I want to see them sucking the trees dry of maple syrup.
Yes. It's all tapped. It's all tapped in the tree, and then they condense it down.
I don't think I believe you. I think it's all high fructose corn syrup, fake Chinese stuff. That's what I think.
And the best thing is it comes right out of that big kettle, whatever that condenser is, and then they just put it over fresh snow, and it becomes very hard. And they take a popsicle stick, and they put it in the snow, and then you have a pure maple syrup popsicle.
Yeah, I would not like. Not a fan of maple syrup. Ramsey asked, have either of you ever seen a Sasquatch? We both told stories of seeing evidence of a Sasquatch, but neither of us ever really saw one. We had what may be some sort of encounter related to Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. And then we have here, Philip Blair said, were the people of this town respectful of the native traditions and advice? I don't know if they talked to the natives before they moved in there, or they might have been warned off. There was a reason that the native peoples left that area alone. They didn't go in there. Not only did they not live in that couple 100 square mile area, they wouldn't even go in there to hunt or, you know, get wood and, you know, they would just leave that entire area alone. So I guess they did not heed the warnings.
And also remember, in Canada, the native Canadians, they all have stories of Sasquatch, of the big people.
And this is a great question. Johnny7 says, some people say Bigfoot are interdimensional. Discussed. There's been a lot of material on this because they seem to vanish when they want to, and you can't find them. And that might be why, because this might not be a physical creature. It might be some sort of interdimensional. Or I've heard a theory that it might be time rifts, and we're seeing ancient man that's sort of between ape and human walking around.
There's a lot of evidence, I would say, that they could be interdimensional. And not only from the evidence that I've seen, where we've followed the tracks, and there was only 4 tracks, and the last track was jumping, and then no other tracks in the field. So where did it jump into another world, a dimension?
The tracks just vanish. Yeah, that's crazy.
Monica saw it. Okay, Monica saw it in Washington. And we were out in the middle of the field at night with another lady, and she had this little tiny dog. I think it was Charlie Brown, the name of the dog. And
Oh, my wife's got a little 6-pound yapper. Those things bark at everything. So did the thing go nuts?
they went nuts. So we're in the field and she's holding the dog, and the dog starts going crazy, barking in the direction of the forest.
Wow.
And it was trying to get out of her hands and like run into the forest. And both Monica and the lady looked at the forest, and they said they saw this very tall Sasquatch running very fast across the forest. And by the time I tried to see where they were pointing, it was gone. So it
Oh
was
man,
extremely
you're
fast.
such a slacker, Jason Quitt. I
I
always wanted to see a Bigfoot. I would have bolted
Yes.
towards it just to see a glimpse of it, so that I would know. Because it's fun to read about this stuff, but until you see it for yourself and experience it, you're still like, it's a great story, but I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely made a vision mistake at that night.
We have a question from Bunya, and he asks, is there much written material on Bigfoots by Native Americans? I'm aware of many stories and oral traditions, but I don't know. I'm sure there is at least 2 books by Native people about the legendary hairy man of the forest, the Bushman, the Sasquatch, or there's 100 different names for it.
Yeah, and I've heard stories directly from Native Canadians, firsthand experiences and oral traditions. And I believe there is a lot of books written by these individuals that you could access online.
Oh, we have another question for you, Jason. Reevesy asked, did Jason stay in that room where the hairy thing was looking in the window at him and thoughtfully closing it a second night? I would be terrified.
I was staying in that room, and there's a lot in that area. The Bigfoot stories are playful.
Yeah.
Like they leave they leave it apples, they leave it gifts, and in the morning those gifts are gone. So it's almost like you hear playful, nice stories of Bigfoot. So I wasn't really scared. In fact, I wanted it to happen again. I wanted to have an encounter. I didn't personally, but I saw evidence, and I was with people that visually saw it, and I was too slow to see it. And this goes back to the interdimensional thing. Like, this thing moved so quickly across the forest.
Field. Yeah, I've heard a couple of different stories where people said that it just seemed to dematerialize into the forest, like it was floating backwards into the forest, and then it was gone. That's a crazy story. And I want to share.
And there's one more account that I've heard before, where the person was feeling stalked in the forest, and he said that this bush started to shake, and it was like this Bigfoot just materialized out of the bush.
That's crazy.
So that leads to this kind of spiritual, supernatural, interdimensional,
which is more in line with the Native people's take on what it is. Every time that I'm anywhere where there's like Native peoples and I can respectfully ask about Sasquatches to Native people, I do. And they almost all, maybe 5 or 6 different times I've got to speak to like Native chiefs or shamans in different areas of the country. And they all tell me the same kind of thing, which is that he's the guardian of the forest and a spirit creature, and man cannot truly understand him because he's one with the spirit and with earth at the same time. Just kind of their take on it is that it's not just some unknown species of ape out in the woods that we'll someday discover by science, but that it's been with us for centuries, forever. Since we've been humans, it's been with us. And I want to share this. This is just a graphic which depicts all the different, but I noticed that the hairy man of Alaska is not on here because that may be some sort of separate subspecies. But we have the Firlia from Scotland, Hibagon from Japan. These are all wood apes, unknown species that local people always tell stories of, describe, have reports of. We have the Maricoxia in South America, the orang pendek, which is an interesting one because it's kind of like an upright, too tall walking orangutan. And we have the Sasquatch, of course, North America. Skunk ape is the southern United States. Boy, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. What is that? Water
Bobojan.
South Africa. The Yaren of China is very interesting. They have a lot of legends, reports, stories, books about the Yaren. And just as many Bigfoot hunters are out in the United States looking for Bigfoot or Sasquatch, in China, believe it or not, they have their own people out there looking for the Yaren. And of course, the Yeti, which started a lot of this stuff in the modern age, the abominable snowman, and the Yowie of Australia. And now I guess we can add to that the hairy man of Alaska, which is another sort of separate but similar creature.
Yes. And, I was thinking about this the other day because a lot of these native traditions talk about this creature as a type of shapeshifter where it can actually change forms into any animal, very strange animals as well. So they could take any form. They could even turn into humans. And what the natives talk about is that this creature could possibly be the actual spirit of the forest. So could trees and plants manifest into a creature to protect itself?
Oh, that's crazy. I've never thought of that or heard that before, but that's a great theory.
It's a first on this show.
And we have Dan Hogan asks, does this area in Alaska where the hairy man has been seen a large number of UFO sightings? I did not find reports of UFO sightings that seem to go along with this. At least I didn't find them. They may be out there. There's a Stan out in Pittsburgh. He's a sort of like the Kecksburg UFO crash expert. He's a big proponent. There's a documentary he made. Stan Gordon is his name. He was a previous guest on our show here. He's got a whole theory that Bigfoot and UFOs go together, and he can show you on maps where he's taken UFO report and then a Bigfoot report in the same area. But I don't see that with this specific case of the hairy man.
Well, it's not too far away from Nome, Alaska, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh.
And
so
Nome,
reports?
Nome, Alaska is a huge hotbed of UFO activity and high strangeness. If you look into Nome, Alaska, there is a ton of disappearances there that are just completely unexplained. So Nome is a huge hotbed of the paranormal as well.
That is crazy. And we have Kalina Angel, and she's saying, I've heard stories of Sasquatch where people had experiences with benevolent Sasquatch, while others have had experiences with malevolent Sasquatches. What do you know of this phenomenon? You want to take that one, Jason?
I've heard both, obviously. And I heard a story from a native medicine man where Sasquatches are actually part of their ceremonies. So when certain rites or certain medicines are taking place, let's say in sweat lodges, the Sasquatch are actually there to monitor the area and protect what's going on. One story I heard was that a person that was supposed to keep watch outside of the medicine tent fell asleep. And that's a huge disrespectful thing to do during a medicine treatment. And he said that the creature came out of the forest and basically hit him so hard that he flew back 10 feet.
Well, that's kind of crazy.
To wake him up because he was not performing the rites properly. So they're benevolent to be part of the ceremony, but when the person slacked, it came out and slapped the guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I guess there's reports. So I've heard reports, more benevolent ones than I've heard, but there's reports of like Bigfoot type creatures like grabbing somebody and taking them, and then the guy like lived with the Sasquatches in some cave for 2 days before they let him go. That's crazy. And I heard a similar story about a woman that was lost in the forest. Here's a benevolent one. And a Sasquatch came out of nowhere, picked her up, and carried her to the main road.
Wow. There's also a report from a hairy man in Alaska that was a positive one, where they kidnapped a woman because one of the baby Sasquatches was sick. And this woman was a healer. So she said she was in the cave with this entire family of these hairy men, and she was with this baby Sasquatch, like helping it get back to health. And then after that, she was returned.
Wow, Johnny Seven says the Scottish Sasquatch ape man of the forest looks like his ex-wife. That's terrible and wonderful at the same time, Johnny Seven. If they are interdimensional, why do you think they take that shape? Maybe they don't have a choice. I don't know. Maybe that's the form that they're given to appear in.
Again, maybe it has to do with the environment it's being created in. To adapt to a forest-like environment, so it would have the best traits of, let's say, human, and the best traits of animals.
Yeah, this brings us to another question of jonicide. Could there be different types of Sasquatches, one type friendly and one type not so much? From everything that I've seen, and I've been following Bigfoot stuff for a long time, most of the Bigfoot reports are pretty, like they're benevolent or they're elusive and they just kind of dart off when people see them, and they're not aggressive, they're not territorial, they're not violent. But this hairy man, one of the reasons it's such a crazy story to me is because this is a murderous, by all reports, it's a 15-foot tall, murderous ape-like creature covered in hair that walks upright with fangs and claws and murders and rips people's heads off and arms and legs. I would call that definitely malevolent. And maybe this hairy man is a totally different thing from Sasquatch and not related, but there's a lot of similarities except for the behavior of them.
Yes. And Reamsy said he would fund both of us to go out there and document this ourselves. And I'll say, no.
Reamsy, buy me a plane ticket to Anchorage and charter me a boat to Fort Chatham. I will go. I got camping gear. I don't have a thermal camera or like all this fancy squatching gear, but I would definitely do that if somebody wanted to fund that. That would be great.
Not me.
I mean,
I support you.
Right now, I kind of think that Port Chatham might be safer than my current environment with all
Oh,
things.
jeez.
It's been crazy. I just wanted to comment real quickly because I know people come here for an escape, but this has been a terrible, terrible couple of months for everybody. So I hope that we can get back to sort of this fun escape of looking into these crazy stories. Last Sunday was my birthday, and I got to watch the neighborhood I grew up in get looted, and every store in it burned and looted. It was really sad. So maybe Port Chatham's not that bad. You just got to deal with one 15-foot monster, or there might be a group of them. That's scary. That might be worse than looters. Yeah.
Yeah. So, damn.
And how is it in Canada? It's pretty. You guys are too polite to riot, right? For those I sent Jason a GIF earlier, and it said Canadian rioting and looting, and it had a guy walk over to a trash can and tip it over and run away. So
No. You got it all wrong. In Canada, we're reverse protesting. We're giving all our belongings back to the stores.
Yeah, you guys are that polite.
Yes.
Crazy how polite. It's so weird. We're so close in geographical location, but you guys are so different from us.
Did you see the pause of Justin Trudeau?
Oh, when he asked about Trump, yeah, he was like, "How do I say this nicely?" Pause here for an agonizing amount of time while I try to think of something to say.
That's political. He had to really think politically at that moment.
Yeah, I don't like that guy for the sole reason that my wife thinks he's a real good-looking guy. So every time he's on the TV, I'm like, flip, see you later, Canadian idiot. That my wife likes. That's crazy. So we'll see if we have somebody said what is this? Reamsy says, I suppose I'm prejudiced against Sasquatches. I used to hear about them abducting ladies and making them pregnant. That's crazy.
Wow. Well, actually, the natives had two stories. Basically, they would kidnap children. So children were the most susceptible to these attacks. And then there's another story that Sasquatches themselves are lost children that went missing in the forest.
Yeah, they could be wild people. And there's also another native story that there is one tribe in particular that will send a person to go live like an animal in the forest for years. It's like part of their shaman training, and they will just go become a wild human, a man of the forest for years and years and years. And some people think that some of these sightings could be related to that tradition, which may continue in modern times for all we know.
Yes, and there's actually been news reports. I remember reading an article from California where someone actually shot one of these wild men in the forest, and it just turned out it was just some person who lived in the forest for a very long time by themselves.
Yeah. And here Bunya says, I hope my childhood town Inglewood is peaceful. So do I. That's what we all hope. You know, I think what was upsetting for me is that there was a lot of memories there, and now all those stores are going to get bulldozed and demolished. So, you know, it's kind of nice to go back to your old neighborhood, even if you don't live there or haven't in years, and see like the old whatever, the old shoe store, comic book store, CD store you used to go to. It's all gone now. So that's a shame. You know, I pray for peace every day. That's all I can do, and hope that cooler heads prevail. Oh, take away their fancy Canadian health care, Douglas care. I bet they're in the streets too. That's released.
There are protests.
Protesting in Toronto.
Yeah, they are protesting in Toronto. It has been peaceful.
There was no rioting, right?
No rioting, but it is very suspicious because it seems like around the exact same time, there has been suspicious deaths surrounding people of color. So in Toronto, for example, a woman was thrown or fell from a 24th floor balcony while the cops were in her apartment. And so they said there's something very suspicious there, and it happened around the exact same time as all of this. So people had some fuel to to protest with as well.
Yeah, that's really scary. All this stuff is scary, and I try to not, like, I don't have the brain space for some of this conspiracy land stuff because everything at once. And it's kind of funny. I took a break from my radio show and I said, thank God I can have some restful time. I can turn off the internet and not think about all this conspiracy stuff. And then COVID comes and these riots come and the bricks being dropped off and the Rothschilds and the Illuminati and the New World Order. And I'm feeling very on edge lately. So I'm trying to turn most of it off and concentrate on the stories that I think may be true, like the one we presented tonight.
Yeah. And again, like what you said before, you know, talking about these really crazy stories is a really good escape for a lot of people. Puts us in a very interesting bubble space with all of us here.
Keep putting off doing this show, but I thought people probably need this right now, and so do I. You know, this escape from you know, the reality is kind of a horror show right now, and I don't want to watch that. I'd rather sort of escape into something else while hopefully this all blows over.
Yes, I completely agree. And that's why I'm here too, because I'm having fun, obviously.
Somebody mentioned that they hear squeaking. You know what? I have these lights behind me, and that's what's squeaking. I can turn those off. We'll see. So
yeah, it's not me.
No, it's definitely me. These lights that I have, they like move, but they need to be oiled, I guess. Yeah. So sorry about that.
You're in your UFO right now.
They might be even more dark and mysterious, you know?
Yes.
If anybody does want to call in, the call-in line is still open. I don't have the number offhand, but
someone has to call in because Stephen worked so hard getting this number set up for you.
And I just so happened to be talking to Jason, and I went, hey, can you call in and I could check this? And I was amazed because it forwarded right to my cell phone, and then I sort of just put it on speakerphone, and you can hear who's ever calling into the show. But we can do that another time. For now, to be honest with you, everything I think worked tonight, and I'm happy about that. I definitely want to thank Jason and all you guys for showing up. I don't even know how many people are here.
John wants to see my crystal pipe, and I think I'm going to do it.
Yeah, go ahead. Go get it. That's fine. Sasquatch is outside Jason's window ripping a joint, a little hairy man kush. Maybe, yeah. Maybe it's attracted to that. Oh, here we go. Jonicide wants to see his awesome crystal pipe.
Okay, so look how long this is.
Oh, wow.
It just keeps going. And
It's
it's a
so what is that? Quartz?
it's a Oralite 23.
I don't
And
even know what it is.
It's an amethyst from Ontario, and
Right?
it's cut into a crystal skull. And then you have
Wooden pipe?
a wooden pipe, and then you have a hole here. So hold on.
I should say that we do not condone or endorse whatever he is smoking in that pot unless it is just a tobacco product. But I won't say.
No. It's actually this is a sacred pipe.
Yeah,
and
that mix, like that shamanic mix.
yes, there's shamanic medicine in here called kinnicknick, which means gathering.
Is it legal?
It's 100% legal. There's no psychoactive properties.
Well, no, I was going to say you should send me some of that, but now that I know that there's no psychoactive properties,
No.
So I'm not really sure why you smoke it then. But okay,
it's for cleansing and purifying the soul.
now you just made me sound like an idiot. Then thank you. Great, Mr. Canada, you're supposed to be polite. You're put that a little better.
But the other pipe, that's another story.
Oh, somebody said, Jason, Jonicide says, Jason, I do have a birthday coming up, just saying.
Nice.
Let's start a new business.
Oh, yeah. This is the only pipe there is, actually. Is the only pipe made out of that. So, very lucky.
Lungs for that. So if anybody has any other questions, otherwise we're going to wrap it up here in just a little while. I don't want to keep Jason too long because he's actually got like things to do tomorrow, unlike me, I don't have anything going on. I don't have anything to do.
But, it was a great story. 100% factual.
Yeah, it could be. All this stuff I checked and double checked because me, I'm very big, and listen, I haven't posted these sources, but I have them. So if anybody wants to really dig into the story, I can give you the links and show you where I found this information. And I would just like to say to everybody that's watching or in the live chat, if you find any more information, we may do a part 2. I'm trying to get to this gentleman who made look at that. Hold on, this is going to take a second.
Last minute caller.
Press 1 to send a voicemail.
I got to press 1. There we go.
Hey.
Hello, this is Steven, and you've reached Truth Seekers. Who are you and where are you calling from?
This is Kalina Angel calling from Michigan.
Michigan.
So,
I love Michigan.
Might as well go up to Canada.
Can you hear her, Jason?
I can, just 5 hours away from me. That's how close Michigan is from Ontario.
My daughter Lilith from Michigan, little baby.
Oh, wow. Did you have a question or comment for me and Jason?
I do. Sorry, I couldn't hear Jason, so I was waiting. I have a little story for you guys that I wanted to tell you about and see what your comments are on it. I don't want to say who this family member is because I want.
Hello?
She was a kid. She used to have a lot of abduction experiences, and so to avoid that, because she would wake up with all like the standard things that would happen. Her shirt would be turned inside out. She would have marks on her body, etc. Well, one night she went upstairs and she was sleeping. She actually got into the habit of doing this on a regular basis, and she would just take a nap up there after everybody was asleep. And apparently some of these beings came in, and one of them looked just like the Bigfoot that came off the ship along with the other beings. Ooh. And tripped on her, and she screamed, and apparently it got startled and ran off. This was her telling as a kid, and that's how she remembers it. So I wanted to know a little bit more about what you guys think about in terms of some of the Sasquatch or beings that look like Sasquatch being maybe some extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional beings, because I definitely think a lot of them are extra-dimensional, if not all of them. And that's my question.
You want to take that, Jason? I'll just, I would just say that there's various reports and stories of Bigfoot or Sasquatch-like creatures being spotted with other types of aliens getting on or off craft, like grays, typical grays, or big-headed, small, 3-foot tall humanoids. And then there's a Sasquatch with them. And a lot of people have theorized that that's some kind of servitor race for the more advanced ETs. What do you think, Jason?
I've heard that as well. But from my experience and from what I've seen, I absolutely think there is something to this multidimensional supernatural being that can just phase in and out of this world. And it goes to a lot of ancient traditions that our world is leveled, and that there are other worlds in our physical world, and we can phase in and out of them. And many people are writing about this. There's a lot of people saying that just go missing in forests, like a missing 411 type of thing. Could they just kind of walk into a forest and by accident step into one of these intersections between worlds and step into another world, a rift?
Yeah, I've read a story that somebody saw what they thought was some kind of portal, and then they saw a Bigfoot later in the day. They thought they saw some kind of portal in the forest. Later in the day, they saw what they thought was a Bigfoot. So there's been some stories like that.
Yeah. So I personally, from everything that I've heard, witnessed, and experienced, there is something to this multidimensional thing.
Absolutely, could be. Oh, the call dropped. I'm not sure why, but I wanted to let her know that I mentioned there's going to be a special prize for our first live caller, and you got it. So you can email me at truthseekershow at gmail.com, and I will get that to you. And thank you for calling. If anybody else wants to call in, otherwise, we have just a few more questions from the live chat. I'll try not to keep you too long. This one is that dimensional thing what happens at Skinwalker Ranch? They have Sasquatches and monsters and stuff and UFOs. Yeah, it could be, right? What do you think, Jason?
I believe there's places on the planet where the veil is thin, and that these other types of beings, paranormal forces, even ghosts, can manifest themselves in these places more than other places. So that could be a hot spot as well, yes.
Excellent. Kalina Angel, who just called in, said that she couldn't really hear you. I'm sorry about that, Kalina. Maybe you can, it's weird when you call in if you don't have headphones on sometimes. Well, or, just try the replay, because I could hear him crystal clear. So if you want to hear his answer to your question, if you just try the replay in a little while, you should be able to hear exactly what he had to say. I apologize for that. And then we have another question. Well, this is from Jonicide. I told Jason about a dream I have that a new world was coming out of this one. Well, that's scary, but It's less scary than apocalypse, right? I've been joking on Twitter, and my joke is, what seal are we on? Because I kind of lost track. We've got a worldwide pandemic. We've got nationwide looting and rioting and civil unrest. We've got murder hornets, and now I've just heard that there's an asteroid the size of a skyscraper heading towards Earth, but they don't think it'll hit us.
Thank you for that reminder, Stephen.
Yeah, it's very fearful year 2020.
He did tell me about this dream, and it's interesting because many traditions and even many channelers now, they're talking about a birthing of a new world, or a splitting, a dimensional timeline split, and then there's going to be two Earths. And some people will be taken to that Earth, and some people will be taken to this Earth. I don't know if it's
like an ascension thing, though, because I don't know that I believe these kind of stories.
Well, I don't know if it's symbolic.
Like if I'm 51% of service to others, am I going to the good Earth? Because if so, I think I don't know about these stories.
So if you're 49% asshole, you're still good, buddy.
Excellent. I try to maintain a proper balance. I'm sure I just got in trouble earlier on Facebook because somebody in my family said something like a dummy. I had to go, what are you talking about? I knew you when you were growing up, you never had to work or do anything. She's off, being a social justice warrior. So I got asshole points for that tonight, I'm sure. And if she's listening and watching, I apologize. We're family. Let's just, forget what I said. whatever, do your thing, right?
Here's the bottom line of all ascension teachings is be genuinely a good person.
Yeah.
That's it. Be genuinely a good person, have a kind heart, and you are golden. Literally.
I've been thinking a lot about that lately because I have two children. One of them is very curious and asks a lot of questions, and I'm trying to figure out, like, when I was a child, it was Christianity and Catholicism. I was in Catholic school, and so I got my moral framework of what was right, what was wrong, how to be empathetic towards people and care about other people from the religion. But we don't really have organized religion here, so I'm going to have to do something just to make sure that he develops a good moral compass and fiber of his being, but so far I have no complaints. He takes good care of his brother. He's, genuinely good kid so far. But I worry about that stuff. Like, how do you teach that to a child? I don't know.
You just show them how to be caring to others, basically, I think.
Yeah, I think we're doing that. My wife does a better job than me. But yeah. So, Jason Quitt, what's going on with you? What's next on the horizon for you? All these conferences are kind of canceled and stuff. So
everything is canceled. So
life is canceled, right?
Life is canceled.
Yeah.
So I'm just here working on different projects. I can't really share what they are just yet, but I will in the future.
Listen, Jason does this to me all the time. He tells me about, I'm working on something incredibly exciting, but I can't tell you about it. So I've developed another conspiracy theory that Jason Quitt is a secret agent. And Jason Quitt, sometimes he's very forthcoming. He's like, well, I'm working on this or that. And other times he's like, it's awesome. It's amazing, but I can't tell you about it yet.
Well, the hint is it's in music, of all things.
Awesome.
So it's outside of this community, but it is music related. And I've been working very hard on that, but I don't know exactly when I could share it.
Wow.
But
yeah, for those that don't know, Jason is a big synthesizer freak. That's probably why we became friends, because I am too. You can hear some of this music. Oh, and I wanted to mention that tonight's music was from a very incredible artist. You can look them up. They're called Oblivion. So every week we're going to try to feature some of my musicians' friends' music in our bumpers or our intro or whatever we could do to kind of help support independent music creators, because that's rough right now too.
Yeah, the music was actually really good. I was going to ask you about that. So
yeah, that's called Oblivion, and this guy makes whole albums. He gives them away for free. He lets anybody use the music as long as they credit him. That's an incredible way to be.
Oh yeah. So, hopefully one day in the future I could show.
Oh, I'm sorry. Philip Blair has Yale University found moral judgments in children as young as 3 months old. Science of kindness. That's good news. I'd like to see that.
And, I was actually thinking about this, that I remember as a child, someone trying to get me to steal something from a store, like a convenience store. A friend egging you on as a child to, take that. And I felt like I was going to throw up. Like I physically felt pain in my body that I was doing something wrong.
Yeah, you have a good conscience developed, yeah.
So it's like, is that innate? Is that something that we have as human beings to know what's right and wrong built into us?
I think there's got to be varying levels of compassion that people have just naturally, and empathy, because what makes one person a bully and nasty to all the other children, and one person, the kind of person that would pick a kid up that just got knocked down by the bully? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. There's got to be. And I've always thought I was on the better end of the spectrum. I've always had, never teased anybody, try to be a good kid and not mess with anybody else, help the kids that were getting messed with if I could. There's got to be a sort of a spectrum of conscience.
Yes. And, who knows? Maybe they're studying it. I haven't looked into that, but I definitely know that it's part of us. And maybe, and then I was hearing a lot of people talk about video games and, violence in media and how that is taking away this type of feeling of these children, so they actually can't feel what's right and wrong anymore.
Wow. Well,
Wow.
there's the other thing I just wanted to mention is that Jason Quitt has this incredible book. Do you want to tell everybody about your book and where they could get it? Because I got to say that when I first heard about this book, I didn't know him at all. And so I went and got the book and read it. And at first I went, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy bunch of stories. But then it kept on hitting me over and over again, some of these specific experiences that he had that are written in this book. And then I read the reviews of the book on Amazon, which were so supportive of him because people had similar experiences, didn't understand them. Just an incredible book. And also of note that I blame Jason for some stuff. I just say, well, a multidimensional time traveler came here, and that's why I didn't make dinner tonight. Sorry, honey, I had to order pizza. So someday my wife might meet Jason Quitt and punch him in the face because I just blame him. Like, was that my multidimensional time traveler friend? But in all seriousness, this book is just a great read. And if you want a real journey to go on, his book is one of those. And I might do some sort of review on it and read passages out of it. That's how important a book I think it is.
That's incredible. I did not know that you read my book. So
yeah, I did before our first interview. But then remember, I was very skeptical, and I try to get you to prove it, and I try to set up some tests to see if you could really astrally project or time travel or and then sort of went through the gambit of like, I try to gotcha Jason, and Jason had an answer for everything. He was like, well, I would do that for you, but these are not experiences I control. It's sort of like being pulled into a roller coaster ride and you don't control where the roller coaster's going, which is a great answer.
These stories.
The title of your book.
The title of the book is called Forbidden Knowledge: Revelations of a Multidimensional Time Traveler. And I wrote it with a famous crime writer for the Toronto Star named Bob Mitchell.
Bob Mitchell is awesome and has written a ton of material of crazy stories.
Yes. And you know what? I still can't believe that I wrote this book and put it out there, because it's like kind of sharing your most intimate, private experiences to the world.
I thought that it came off as like the most intimate thoughts that this person has had for years and years and years, all kind of laid bare. And that's another reason why I liked it, because it's juicy and it's dramatic and it's sort of very interpersonal about some of these experiences that you had. It's crazy ride.
Thank you. Yes, you should definitely give it a review.
And I want you to write a new one. I want you to write like an update of what has happened since that book is written, because your experiences, you say, are continuing, right?
Yes, not as much as it was when I was in my early 20s. Things kind of slowed down, but I have had very interesting experiences. I still leave my body maybe once every couple months or more. I still have... I don't want to say like precognition type of things, but almost like dreams, like deja vu. So,
wow. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sort of paranormal handicapped. I've never had any, I've had something that I thought I saw in the sky, and that Bigfoot thing happened to me. Like somebody threw some big rocks. That's about it. And for being so interested in this stuff, I would think I would have more, more stories, but.
Well, you do have a cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
And, who knows? Just leave your window open at night.
I'm not doing that because the bears are out lately. This is funny, but what has happened is kind of crazy. Oh, and on a not so happy note, a bear killed a person a few miles from my cabin, like maybe 8 or 9 miles from my cabin.
No.
Yes. And sort of ate half of the guy, because here's what's going on. Because of the COVID lockdowns and everything that's going on, and because I guess a lot of people just don't even have money to travel, even if they own their cabins up there, there is no people. There is like a drop of 95% of the people that are usually there for the warm season. So, and the restaurants are all closed. There's no dumpsters. So these bears are hungry. and they're coming closer to the cabin. I had one right brushing up against, like rubbing his back on the front of my cabin, and I was watching it in the window, and like, it's scary. So no, I won't be keeping my windows open. Not for a while.
Good call. Good call.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank Jason Quitt for joining us tonight. I think we're going to wrap it up here because we don't want these things to go too long. One of the things I'm going to love about this new show, Jason, is that before I had a set time that I had to fill. Mm-hmm. And we all know that sometimes you just don't have 2 hours. So you got to fill it with, I don't want to say garbage, but you got to just, let's put some C stories in here instead of all A. I want this new show to be my A game. And if we're done, we're done. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us in the live chat, old friends and new, and encourage you to really right now, the best way you can support me is to retweet this broadcast as soon as we're done with it. And, like, share, subscribe. Anything else, Jason?
No, just thank you for having me, and I will subscribe to this channel and share this video.
Awesome. And by the way, Jason, Canadian maple syrup is still bullshit. Just so you know.
Agree to disagree.
All right. Someday you'll show me.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Good night, everybody. And I'm going to play us out with another piece of music that's actually like a "We'll be right back," I think. But I'm sorry, we won't be right back. But you can be right back to the replay if you missed this. Thanks, each and every one of you, for joining us. If you like this kind of comment, please come back, because I don't have much else to do. So I'm going to be really hitting it hard, trying to do a few shows a week at least. Thanks, Jason. Good night. Good night, everybody. Until next time, folks, my name is Stephen Cambion, reminding you that sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. Good night, folks.